The alarm system screamed across every defense station in the solar system at exactly 0 hours. Admiral Gi Wan Kim was already awake when the call came through to her quarters aboard the S-Vigilance. She had learned long ago to trust her instincts, and something had kept her from sleeping that night. Now she knew why. The bridge was chaos when she arrived. Officers shouted readings across the command center while holographic displays flickered with incoming data. Commander Minho Park turned to face her, his expression grave. 300 contacts had just appeared at the edge of the solar system, he reported. The ships were massive, far larger than anything in Earth's fleet. They had emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, and they were heading directly toward Earth. Giwan moved to the central display and studied the alien vessels. Their design was unfamiliar, all smooth curves and strange angles that seemed to bend light itself. The computer identified them as belonging to the Velthera Collective, a species humanity had encountered only twice before. Both meetings had been peaceful, just simple trade exchanges at neutral stations. There had never been any hostility between their peoples, until now. Captain Hyun Woo Lee watched the same formation from his station on Mars. The defense platform hung in orbit around the red planet, its weapons systems already powering up automatically. His hands moved across the controls, bringing up detailed scans of the approaching fleet. Lieutenant Ji Soo Choi stood beside him, her face pale as she counted the ships. 300 vessels, she whispered. Earth's entire defense fleet numbered only 200 ships, and most of those were smaller frigates and destroyers. Back on the Vigilance. Gi Wan opened a communication channel to all frequencies. She broadcast a standard greeting in 17 languages, including the limited Velthora vocabulary Earth had learned during their previous encounters. The alien fleet did not respond. Instead, they continued their advance, their speed steady and unwavering. She tried again, this time requesting their intentions and offering to establish diplomatic contact. Still nothing. Only silence from the void. The Earth Defense Council assembled in their emergency bunker beneath Geneva. Director Sung Ho-yoon took his seat at the head of the table, his face drawn with worry. Around him sat the military and civilian leaders who would decide humanity's response to this threat. Counselor Yoon Ji-han argued that they should wait, give the translation teams more time to understand what was happening. Perhaps the Velthera were trying to communicate, she suggested. But their message was in a format Earth's computers could not yet decode. Sung Ho shook his head. The fleet would be within weapons range in 6 hours, he said. 6 hours to decide if humanity would fight or surrender without understanding why this was happening. He turned to the military advisors and asked for options. The responses were grim. If the Velthera intended to attack, Earth's forces might hold them off for a while, but the outcome would likely be defeat. The alien ships were simply too large, too advanced. On the Vigilance, Minho worked frantically with the communications team. They had intercepted broadcasts from the Velthera fleet, but the signals were encrypted with protocols Earth had never seen before. The messages repeated over and over, transmitted on every frequency simultaneously. Whatever the Velthera were trying to say, they were desperate for Earth to hear it. But the encryption held firm against every attempt to break it. G1 made a decision. She ordered the defense fleet to form up in intercepting positions between the Velthora and Earth. If the aliens would not communicate, if they would not stop their advance, then humanity would have to assume hostile intent. It was a terrible choice, she knew, but she could see no other option. The safety of Earth had to come first. Hyun Woo received the orders and began coordinating with the other defense stations. Mars, Jupiter, and the asteroid belt installations all reported ready status. Thousands of missiles and energy weapons locked onto the approaching fleet. Fighter squadrons launched from carriers, their pilots grim-faced and silent. Lieutenant Daeho Shin led his squadron out from the Mars station, his hands steady on the controls despite the fear churning in his gut. Ensign Yunikacho flew on his wing, her voice calm over the cum as she confirmed her weapons were armed. The Velthera fleet reached the outer marker, the invisible line that defined Earth's defensive perimeter. Juan opened one final channel, broadcasting a clear warning. The alien ships were entering restricted space, she announced. They must stop their advance immediately, or Earth's forces would open fire. She counted down from 60 seconds, her heart pounding as the numbers fell. 60, 40, 20, 10. The Velthora fleet did not slow down. They crossed the line without hesitation, their formation tightening as if preparing for battle. Giwan closed her eyes for a moment, then gave the order. "Fire warning shots across their lead vessels," she commanded. "Make them understand we are serious." Brilliant lances of energy streaked across the darkness. The shots were carefully aimed to miss, to pass close enough to the alien ships that the Velthera would know Earth was ready to fight. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the lead Velthora vessel fired back. The particle beam was not a warning shot. It struck an Earth destroyer directly, and the ship simply vanished in a flash of superheated metal and atmosphere. 2 more destroyers died in the next heartbeat. The Velthera were firing in earnest now, their weapons tearing through Earth's defensive line with terrifying precision. Giwan felt her stomach drop as she watched 300 human lives end in seconds. There was no more time for questions or doubts. She opened the fleet-wide channel and spoke the words that would change everything. "All ships," she commanded, "weapons free. Engage the enemy. Protect Earth at all costs." The battle for humanity's survival had begun. Neither side truly understood why they were fighting. The space between Mars and Earth became a storm of light and fire. Missiles streaked through the void in thousands, their trails creating a deadly web across the darkness. Energy beams crossed and recrossed, each one carrying enough power to vaporize a small building. The Velthera fleet pressed forward while Earth's defenders fought to hold them back. Admiral Giwan stood on the bridge of the Vigilance, watching the tactical display with focused intensity. The holographic projection showed every ship, every weapon, every movement in the battle. Red icons marked Earth vessels. Blue icons marked the Velthera. As she watched, another red icon flickered and disappeared. The destroyer Hammer had just been destroyed. Taking its crew of 80 into death with it, Commander Minho coordinated the defense from his station, routing targeting data to the fleet. The Velthera shields were strong, he reported, but not invincible. Concentrated fire from multiple ships could break through if they focused on single targets. Guan nodded and relayed the orders. The Earth fleet began working in groups, 3 or 4 ships ganging up on individual Velthora vessels. The tactic worked. The first Velthera ship died 10 minutes into the battle, its shields collapsing under sustained bombardment. The alien vessel broke apart in slow motion, pieces spinning off into the void. But the victory cost Earth to frigates and a cruiser. The exchange rate was not in humanity's favor. Captain Hinwu commanded the Mars defense platform. Turning its massive guns on the Velthora formation, the station's weapons were more powerful than anything the fleet carried. And when they fired, Velthera ships shuddered under the impact. Lieutenant Jisoo worked beside him, managing the shield systems as return fire hammered at their defenses. The station shook with each hit, metal groaning under stress it was never designed to handle. A Velthera battleship broke from the formation and accelerated toward the Mars station. Its weapons glowed with building energy, and Hunhua knew what was coming. He shouted for Jisoo to divert all power to the forward shields. The order came just in time. The Velthora ship fired, and the beam struck with the force of a small star. The shields held, but barely. Warning alarms screamed across the station as power systems overloaded. Lieutenant Daeho led his fighter squadron into the heart of the enemy formation. The small craft darted between massive capital ships, too quick for the Velthora point defense systems to track effectively. Daeho's targeting computer locked onto a Velthora carrier, one of the largest ships in their fleet. He fired his missiles and peeled away as they struck home. Explosions blossomed along the carrier's hull. An atmosphere vented into space in huge plumes. Ensign Unico followed him through the chaos, her own weapons finding targets among the Velthora escorts. She was good, Daeho thought, better than most pilots with twice her experience. Her shots rarely missed, and she flew with a precision that kept her alive when others died around them. Another fighter exploded to their left, the pilot's scream cutting off mid-transmission. Yuna did not flinch. She simply adjusted her course and kept firing. Hours passed. The battle raged across millions of kilometers, ships hunting each other through the darkness. Earth's losses mounted steadily. 20 ships gone, 30, 40. But the Velthera were suffering too. Their formation was breaking apart, individual vessels drifting out of position. Some showed heavy damage, trailing debris and leaking atmosphere. Others moved erratically, as if their navigation systems were failing. Commander Jiang Xiao brought the second wave into the fight. Fresh ships with full weapons and shields. She had been holding them in reserve, waiting for the right moment. That moment was now. Her battle group struck the Velthera flank, catching them between two Earth forces. The aliens tried to reform their lines, but it was too late. They were surrounded. Giang noticed something strange as her ships closed in. The Velthera were fighting back, yes, but their tactics seemed wrong. They were defending themselves, but not attacking with the aggression she would expect from an invasion force. Several Velethera ships were trying to push through the Earth line rather than destroying it. They fired only when fired upon, and their shots seemed almost reluctant. As if they were trying to disable rather than destroy. She reported this to Admiral Juan. But the message got lost in the confusion of battle. There was too much happening, too many ships maneuvering, too many decisions to make. Juan was focused on the immediate threat, on protecting Earth from what appeared to be an overwhelming enemy force. The subtle details of Velthara tactics would have to wait. The turning point came 6 hours into the battle. A coordinated strike by Earth forces destroyed the Velthera flagship, the massive vessel breaking in half under concentrated fire. Without their command ship, the alien formation fell into complete disarray. Ships began breaking off, some trying to withdraw toward the edge of the system. Others seemed to lose all coordination, drifting without purpose. Guan saw the opportunity and took it. She ordered pursuit, sending fresh ships after the retreating Velthora. The aliens could not be allowed to regroup, could not be given time to call for reinforcements. This had to end now, today, with the complete destruction of the enemy fleet. It was a harsh decision, but war was harsh. Mercy could cost humanity everything. The hunt continued for another 2 hours. Earth fighters chased down fleeing Velthara ships, destroying them one by one. Some of the alien vessels did not even defend themselves, simply broadcasting their strange encrypted messages until the missiles struck. Deho found himself sickened by it, shooting at ships that seemed to be trying to surrender. But his orders were clear, and he followed them. When the last Velthera ship died, silence fell across the battlefield. The shooting stopped. The alarms went quiet. Commander Minho began counting casualties while Juan slumped in her chair, exhausted beyond measure. 60 Earth ships destroyed. Thousands of humans dead. But they had one. The entire Velthera fleet was gone. 300 ships reduced to wreckage and debris. Recovery teams launched from the surviving vessels, searching the debris field for escape pods and survivors. There would be time for questions later, time to understand why this battle had happened. For now, Earth had survived, and that was enough. Or so they thought. The celebration lasted exactly 4 hours. People danced in the streets of Earth's cities, relief washing over them like a wave. Humanity had faced extinction and won. The Velthera threat was ended. Children waved flags while news broadcasts showed footage of the burning alien ships. Victory, the headlines proclaimed. Earth stands strong. Then Dr. Young Sukong made his discovery. Everything changed. The xenobiologist was examining bodies, recovered from a destroyed Velthera cruiser when he noticed the abnormalities. The aliens showed signs of severe radiation poisoning, their tissues damaged in ways that could not have come from the battle. He ran tests, checking and rechecking his results. The conclusion was inescapable. These Velthera had been dying long before Earth's weapons touched them. Some had been dead for days, perhaps weeks. He called Admiral Juan immediately. She arrived at the medical bay within minutes, still wearing her uniform from the bridge. Young-Su showed her the evidence, explaining what the tissue samples revealed. The Velthora fleet had not been healthy warriors coming to invade Earth. They had been sick, dying, barely holding on to life. Whatever had killed them, it was not human weapons. Engineer Sunmi Bay worked in a different part of the recovery effort, trying to access the data cores from a Velthera command ship. The alien computer systems were strange, built on principles Earth's technology barely understood. But Sunmi was patient and clever. She found a way in, bypassing the security protocols one by one. When the files finally opened, she wished they had stayed locked forever. The data was fragmentary, corrupted by damage from the battle. But enough remained to tell a story. Sunmi read through the logs with growing horror, her hands shaking as she translated the Velthera text. The fleet had not come to attack Earth. They had come begging for help. The encrypted messages they had broadcast were not threats or demands. They were desperate pleas for sanctuary, for aid, for any mercy humanity could offer. She brought the data to Admiral Juwan's office, where the command staff had gathered. Director Sung-ho was there, along with Counselor Yoonji and the other leaders who had authorized the battle. Sunmi projected the files onto the wall and began explaining what she had found. The room fell silent as the truth became clear. 3 weeks earlier, the Velthera homeworld had been destroyed. Not by war, not by natural disaster, but by something else. The logs called it the Harvesters, though the translation was uncertain. Whatever they were, they had come to Velthora space and consumed everything. Planets, stations, entire civilizations vanished into their machines. The fleet that had approached Earth was all that remained of the Velthera people. 300 ships carrying nearly 2 million refugees, fleeing across the galaxy with nowhere to go. Commander Minho sat down heavily, his face ashen. The Volthara had detected Earth during their flight and turned toward it as the nearest inhabited system. They had hoped to find sanctuary, to beg for shelter from the harvesters that pursued them. Their encryption had been a security measure, an attempt to keep their pursuers from intercepting their communications and learning. Where they were going, Captain Hinwoo pulled up the battle recordings, watching them again with new understanding. The Velthora had never attacked first. Earth's warning shots had struck near their lead ships. The aliens had responded in panic, thinking themselves under attack. They had not been trying to invade. They had been trying to force their way past Earth's defenses to reach the inner system, to land on Earth or Mars and beg for help in person. Everything made terrible sense now. The strange tactics Jiang had noticed, the way Velthora ships tried to push through rather than destroy the Earth fleet. The aliens had been defending themselves while desperately trying to complete their mission. Some had stopped fighting entirely toward the end, choosing to broadcast their pleas rather than shoot back. And Earth had killed them all. Lieutenant Jisoo Choi felt sick. She had helped coordinate the defense, had fired weapons herself at ships that were trying to surrender. The Velthera had been dying already, poisoned by radiation from whatever the harvesters had done to their homeworld. Their life support systems were failing. Their medical bays were overwhelmed. They had been hours away from death when Earth destroyed them. Counselor Yoonji spoke first, her voice barely a whisper. "How many?" she asked. "How many were aboard those ships?" Sunmi checked the data files. 2,100,000 Velthera, she replied. Civilians, mostly. Scientists, artists, children. The military vessels had been evacuating population centers when the homeworld fell. They had grabbed whoever they could and run. Director Sung-ho put his head in his hands. Earth had just destroyed the last survivors of an entire species. Not warriors or invaders, but refugees fleeing genocide. And they had done it because of a misunderstanding. Because neither side could communicate clearly enough. Because fear had driven both species to violence. Admiral Giwan stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. She had given the order to fire. She had commanded the pursuit that hunted down fleeing ships. The decision had been hers, and now she would carry the weight of it forever. 2 million lives ended because she had chosen to shoot first and ask questions later. The truth could not be contained. Lieutenant Jisoo leaked the intelligence reports to civilian networks within hours. She knew it meant the end of her career, possibly prison, but she did not care. The people of Earth deserved to know what had been done in their name. The files spread across the global network like wildfire. Riots erupted in major cities within a day. Protesters surrounded military bases, screaming for justice. Some called for Admiral Giwan to be tried for genocide. Others defended her, saying she had made the only choice possible with the information available. The debate raged across every news channel, every social network. Every dinner table on Earth, Commander Minho defended Giwan publicly, arguing that she had acted to protect humanity from an unknown threat. But privately, he struggled with doubt. He had advised caution during the initial approach, had suggested waiting for more information. His counsel had been overruled in the rush to defend Earth. Could things have been different if they had waited just a few more hours? Dr. Yansu continued his examinations of the Velthara bodies, driven by a need to understand. He found evidence of families among the dead, parents and children who had died together when their ship was destroyed. The aliens had not even been that different from humans, he thought. They valued the same things, loved their families, fought to survive. And now they were extinct because Earth had been too afraid to take a risk on peace. The protests turned violent on the third day. In Seoul, demonstrators broke through security barriers and stormed a military complex, demanding answers. Police fought to hold them back while news cameras broadcast everything live. Similar scenes played out in New York, London, Mumbai, and dozens of other cities. The world was tearing itself apart over what humanity had done. Admiral Giwan submitted her resignation to the Defense Council. She walked into Director Sung-ho's office and placed the formal letter on his desk without ceremony. This was her responsibility, she said quietly. She had given the orders that destroyed the Velthira. She should face the consequences. Sung-ho refused to accept it. He tore the letter in half and told her that resigning solved nothing. Earth needed her now more than ever. Commander Minho disagreed with that decision. He requested a transfer to a ground posting anywhere away from space operations. He could not serve under Giwan anymore, not because he blamed her, but because he blamed himself. He had seen the signs that something was wrong with the Velthera approach. He had noticed the strange tactics, the hesitant attacks. But he had not pushed hard enough to investigate before the shooting started. The argument between them happened in private, but word leaked out anyway. Minho accused the command structure of rushing to violence. Giwan defended her choices, saying that protecting Earth had to come first. Neither was entirely wrong, and that made it worse. They had both tried to do the right thing, and the result was genocide. Dr. Young-soo threw himself into studying the Velthira data, hoping to find some meaning in the tragedy. He focused on understanding what had destroyed their homeworld, thinking that perhaps humanity could honor the dead by learning from their fate. What he discovered was worse than anyone imagined. The harvesters were not a natural phenomenon or a conventional military force. They were an advanced machine intelligence, self-replicating and utterly ruthless. They moved through the galaxy, consuming entire star systems, breaking down planets into raw materials to build more of themselves. The Velthara had fought them for months before their defenses collapsed. Nothing in their arsenal had been able to stop the machines. Engineer Sunmi worked day and night trying to extract more information from the damaged Velthara computers. She barely slept, surviving on stimulants and desperation. What she learned made sleep impossible anyway. The harvesters followed refugee fleets, she discovered. They used the fleeing survivors as scouts to locate new civilizations. Wherever the refugees went, the harvesters would eventually follow. The implication hit like a physical blow. By coming to Earth, the Velthira had marked humanity as the harvesters' next target. And by destroying the Velthora fleet, Earth had eliminated the only beings in the galaxy who knew how the machines could be fought. The refugees had possessed knowledge, experience, tactical data that might have helped humanity survive. All of that was now floating debris in space. Captain Hinwoo brought this information to the Emergency Defense Council. The room fell silent as he explained what Sunmi had found. The harvesters were already on their way, tracking the path the Velthira fleet had taken. Earth's sensors had detected anomalous readings at the edge of the system. Gravitational distortions consistent with the harvester technology described in Velthora records. The machines would arrive in 3 months, maybe less. Counselor Yunji demanded to know how many harvester ships they would face. Yunwu checked the data. Not ships, he corrected. The harvesters did not use vessels the way organic species did. They were a vast network of machines, countless units working together. The force approaching Earth would dwarf the Velthora fleet. Early estimates suggested tens of thousands of individual machine units, possibly more. The council erupted in chaos. Some members called for immediate evacuation of Earth. Others insisted humanity prepare to fight. A few suggested trying to negotiate with the machines, though the Velthora data made clear that the harvesters did not communicate with organic life. They simply consumed it. Lieutenant Daiho Shin sat in his quarters aboard the Mars station. Reviewing the gun camera footage from the battle, he watched himself destroy Velthora ships that were trying to flee, firing missiles into vessels that had stopped defending themselves. Some of those ships had been broadcasting continuously until the moment they died. Pleas for help in a language he could not understand. Ignored because Earth's computers had failed to decrypt them in time, he volunteered for the reconnaissance mission that same day. Someone needed to go toward Velthora space and gather intelligence on harvester tactics. It was probably a suicide mission, but Daiho did not care. He needed to do something useful, something that might help humanity avoid repeating its mistakes. Ensign Yunaka volunteered to fly on his wing before he even asked. 12 other pilots joined them within hours. Medical officer Giwan Nam made a discovery that offered a slim ray of hope. One Velthara escape pod had survived the battle intact, floating hidden in an asteroid field. The occupant was in deep stasis, barely alive but stable. She worked for 3 days straight to revive the survivor using a combination of Velthora medical data and human techniques. On the 3rd day, the alien opened its eyes. His name was Vector, and he had been a military commander in the Velthora Defense Forces. Through hastily programmed translation software, he explained what had happened to his people. The harvesters had appeared without warning in Velthora space 6 months earlier. At first, there had been only a few scouts. Then the main force arrived, and entire star systems went dark within days. The Velthara military had tried everything to stop them. Nuclear weapons barely scratched the machines. Energy weapons were absorbed and used to power harvester systems. Kinetic projectiles destroyed individual units, but the network simply routed around the damage. For every machine destroyed, 10 more appeared. The Velthara had been fighting a losing battle from the start. Vector described the evacuation of the homeworld as the harvesters closed in. The military fleet had grabbed every civilian they could reach and fled into deep space. They had detected Earth's radio transmissions during their flight and altered course, hoping to find allies who might help them fight. Instead, they had found more death. When Admiral Giwan visited Vector in the medical bay, the alien looked at her with eyes that held no anger, only terrible sadness. She tried to apologize, to explain why Earth had fired on the refugee fleet. Vector stopped her with a gesture. He understood, he said through the translator. His people had made the same mistakes when the harvesters first appeared. Fear made everyone stupid. The real question, Vector said, was what would Earth do now? The harvesters were coming, drawn by the Velthora fleet's presence in the system. Humanity had perhaps 3 months to prepare for an enemy that had destroyed a civilization far more advanced than theirs. 3 months to find a way to survive what the Velthora could not. The world changed overnight when the truth about the harvesters became public knowledge. The protests stopped as humanity faced the reality of extinction. People stopped arguing about who was to blame for the Velthar genocide and started preparing for the war that was coming. Everyone understood that if Earth did not find a way to survive the next 3 months, questions of guilt and responsibility would not matter. Admiral Giwan stood before the assembled defense forces and laid out the situation with brutal honesty. The harvesters were coming, and they were bringing a force that made the Velthara fleet look insignificant. Earth's military could not stop them with current weapons and tactics. Every simulation ended the same way, with humanity destroyed and Earth reduced to raw materials for the machine network. Unless something changed, everyone in the room would be dead before winter. Vikathor worked with Dr. Young Soo and engineer Sun Mi. sharing everything he knew about harvester technology. The machines were vulnerable to certain frequencies of electromagnetic radiation, he explained. The Valthera had discovered this late in their war, too late to make a difference. But Earth still had time to adapt their weapons. It would not be enough to win, Vector warned, but it might be enough to make the harvesters work for their victory. Commander. Minho returned to active duty despite his earlier request for transfer. Personal feelings meant nothing now, he said. Earth needed every experienced officer. He and Admiral Giwan worked together again, the tension between them unspoken but present. They coordinated the construction of new weapons based on Vector's information. Pushing Earth's manufacturing to its absolute limits, Captain Hunwu supervised the fortification of the Mars Defense Station. The platform would be humanity's first line of defense when the harvesters arrived. He knew it would not hold for long, but every hour the station bought would give Earth more time to evacuate civilians. Lieutenant Jisoo worked beside him, programming the automated defense systems that would fight on after the crew was dead. The evacuation ships were Commander Jeong Seo's responsibility. She coordinated the construction of massive arc vessels, designed to carry humanity's survivors away from Earth, if the planet fell. The ships were crude, built hastily with whatever materials could be gathered. They would not save everyone. They would barely save anyone. But it was better than nothing. Ji Young selected the passenger lists herself, a task that aged her visibly. Children first, she decided. Then scientists, engineers, people with skills needed to rebuild civilization. She agonized over every name, knowing that choosing who lived meant choosing who died. The Ark ships could carry perhaps 5 million people. Earth's population was 11 billion. Lieutenant Daeho led his reconnaissance mission toward Valthara space 2 weeks after the battle. His small squadron jumped from system to system, following the trail of destruction the harvesters had left. They found dead worlds, planets stripped of all organic matter and most minerals. The harvesters were thorough in their consumption, leaving nothing behind but barren rock. Ensign Unico recorded everything they saw. Building a database of harvester tactics and patterns, the machines moved in waves, she observed. First came scouts that mapped a system's resources, then construction units that built processing facilities. Finally, harvesting swarms that consumed everything organic. The whole process took about 3 weeks per system. On the 5th week of their mission, Daeho's squadron encountered an active harvester operation. They watched from extreme range as thousands of machine units swarmed over a dying planet. The footage they sent back to Earth was terrifying. Individual harvesters were small, each one roughly the size of a fighter craft. But they moved in perfect coordination, millions of units acting as one vast organism. The squadron tried to attack one of the construction sites, hoping to test harvester defenses. It was a disaster. The machines detected the approaching fighters instantly and responded with overwhelming force. Daeho ordered a retreat, but 3 pilots did not make it out. Yuna barely escaped, her fighter taking damage that left it limping back to the rendezvous point. Back on Earth, Engineer Sunmi made a breakthrough. She had been studying the Velthora electromagnetic weapons data and found a way to amplify their effect. By combining multiple frequency generators, she could create a resonance pattern that disrupted harvester coordination. Individual machines would survive, but the network connections between them would fail. The harvesters would become confused, easier to destroy. The first prototype weapon was installed on the Vigilance. Admiral Giwan tested it against a mock-up target built from salvaged Velthora technology. The results were promising but limited. The weapon worked, but its range was short and it required enormous power. The Vigilance could fire it perhaps 3 times before exhausting its reactor. Against thousands of harvesters, 3 shots would not be enough. Dr. Youngsu worked with Vector to understand how the harvesters reproduced. The machines used raw materials from consumed planets to build more of themselves, the Veltora explained. They converted matter directly, assembling new units from atomic components. The process was horrifyingly efficient. A single harvester could consume a small moon and produce hundreds of copies of itself within days. Vector shared one final piece of information that may have changed everything. The harvesters had a central processing node, a massive construct that coordinated all units within a star system. Destroying it would not stop the machines, but it would slow them down significantly. The Velthera had never managed to reach one during their war. The nodes were too well defended, surrounded by thousands of Guardian units. Admiral Guy Wan began planning an operation to target the Harvester node when it arrived. It would require committing Earth's entire fleet to a single attack, leaving the planet defenseless. If the attack failed, humanity would have nothing left to fight with. If it succeeded, the Harvesters would be disrupted long enough for the evacuation ships to escape. Either way, billions would die. The decision was brought before the Emergency Council. Director Sung Ho argued for the attack, saying that a slim chance of survival was better than certain death. Councillor Yoonji opposed it, insisting they should focus on defending Earth directly. The vote was deadlocked until Vector spoke up through his translator. "Do not repeat my people's mistake," he said. The Velthera had tried to hold their homeworld until it was too late to evacuate effectively. By the time they fled, most of their population was already dead. Earth still had time to save some of its people, but only if they acted now. Fighting to the last would serve only pride, not survival. The council voted to approve Jiwan's plan. The fleet would attempt to destroy the Harvester processing node while the evacuation. Ships launched carrying humanity's survivors. If Earth survived, the refugees could return. If not, at least some fragment of human civilization would continue among the stars. Lieutenant. The Daeho Squadron returned from Velthora space with critical targeting data for the node. They had lost 8 more pilots gathering the information, but it was complete. Yuna presented the findings to the tactical planning group. Her voice steady, despite the exhaustion and grief written on her face, as Earth prepared for the coming battle. The weight of what had been done to the Velthera pressed on everyone involved. They had destroyed the last survivors of a dying species, killed refugees who came seeking help. That mistake could never be undone, never be forgiven, but perhaps it could be learned from. Admiral Giwan addressed the fleet one final time before the Harvesters arrived. She spoke of the Velthera, of the 2 million innocent lives Earth had ended through fear and misunderstanding. She spoke of the responsibility humanity now carried to honor those deaths by surviving, by being better than the fear that had driven them to genocide. If even one human lived through what was coming, that human would carry the memory of the Velthera forward and ensure their sacrifice meant something. The Harvesters arrived exactly 83 days after the battle. Their machines filled the edge of the solar system like a metallic plague, countless units moving in perfect synchronization. Earth's sensors could not count them all. Thousands, certainly, perhaps tens of thousands. More than enough to consume a world, the evacuation ships launched, carrying 5 million souls toward deep space. On Earth, 8 billion people waited to see if humanity's desperate gamble would succeed or if they would join the Velthera in extinction. Either way, the real cost of Earth's victory had finally come due, and the payment would be measured in blood.